My wife gave her parents the house I bought for us. Honey, they need it more. You'll buy a better one later. That's what you work for. So I stopped paying the mortgage, and the bank auctioned off the house. It all started a few years ago when I met Emily. She was beautiful, funny, and seemed to have a huge heart. We met at a bar, one of those nights when you don't expect anything special, but suddenly you're talking to someone who makes you laugh until your stomach hurts. I was 29, had a decent job as a technician at a telecommunications company, and saved every penny I could to one day have my own house. Emily was 26, worked part-time at a clothing store, and lived with her parents. Nothing out of the ordinary, right? Well, that's what I thought. After a year of dating, we decided to get married. It wasn't a fancy wedding, just something small with friends and family. That's when I really met her parents, Mr. Richard and Mrs. Margaret, and her younger sister, Chloe, who still lived with them. From the first moment, I knew they didn't want me there. Mr. Richard looked at me like I was a stray dog that crashed the party, and Mrs. Margaret didn't even say hello. She just said, "I hope you know how to take care of my daughter, because she deserves the best." Chloe, who was about 22 at the time, spent the whole time glued to her phone, but every now and then she'd look up to toss out a comment like, "Wow, what an interesting suit you picked." I was wearing a jacket and tie, not a millionaire, but I didn't look like a mess either. Anyway, I thought they were just nervous because their daughter was getting married and that I'd win them over in time. How wrong I was. The problem started as soon as we moved into a rented apartment together. Emily insisted we visit her parents every weekend. "Honey, they're my family. I can't leave them alone," she'd say with those big eyes that always made me give in. I didn't mind seeing them occasionally, but every visit was like walking into a cage of hungry lions. Mr. Richard talked to me like I was his employee. "Hey, go grab some beers from a store." Mrs. Margaret criticized everything I did. "That's how you cook rice?" Poor Emily. She's going to starve with you. And Chloe, well, she was the worst. She always found a way to put me down. "That's your car?" I thought a real man would have something better. My car was a used 2010 sedan, nothing fancy, but it got me around. I didn't understand why they disliked me so much, but Emily always said, "Don't pay attention to them. Honey, that's just how they are, but they love you." Over time, things got worse. They started asking for favors, but they weren't normal favors, you know? It was more like demands. Once, Mr. Richard called to tell me their TV broke, and that since I was the man of the family now, I should buy them a new one. He didn't ask my opinion. He just sent me the model he wanted, a 55-inch flat screen that cost almost 2 months of my salary. When I told Emily we couldn't afford it, she started crying and said, "So my parents don't matter? You have a job. You can figure something out." I ended up getting it on credit and paying it off in installments that left me eating instant noodles for weeks. Then there were the trips. Every year, Emily's family had a family outing to the beach or some cute little town. And guess who paid for everything? The hotel, the gas, the meals, the souvenirs. Yup, me. The first time, I thought it was a special thing, but then it became routine. Chloe would order expensive cocktails and say, "Put it on my brother-in-law's tab. That's what he's for." Mr. Richard and Mrs. Margaret didn't even say thank you. They acted like it was my duty to keep them happy. Emily, instead of defending me, would say, "Honey, don't be stingy. They're my family." I'm not stingy, but I'm not a millionaire either. I worked extra shifts to keep us afloat, while they kept criticizing me for not giving Emily the life she deserved. Despite it all, I stayed with her because I loved her. I thought things would get better when I finally achieved my dream, buying a house. After years of saving and with a bank loan, I got a nice house in a quiet neighborhood. 3 bedrooms, a little garden, space for a family. The idea was that Emily and I would start something of our own, away from her parents and her sister. I made the down payments, signed the mortgage, and felt on top of the world. I told Emily, "Honey, this is our house, for us, for our kids someday." She smiled and hugged me. And for a moment, I thought it would all be worth it. But then came the day that changed everything. It was a Saturday morning. We had invited her parents and Chloe to see the house. I was proud, gave them the full tour. The spacious living room, the kitchen with new tiles, the backyard where I planned to put a grill. Mr. Richard barely grunted, "It's decent," and Mrs. Margaret said it lacked style. Chloe, as usual, mocked me. "Funny that you think this is luxury." I was used to their comments by now. so I ignored them. But then, while we were eating burgers in the living room, Emily dropped the bomb. "Honey, my parents and Chloe are going to keep the house," she said casually, passing me the ketchup. I froze, my burger halfway to my mouth. "What?" was all I managed to say. She went on, with that innocent smile she used to get her way. "They need it more than we do. The house they're renting is really old. And, well, you'll buy a better one later. That's what you work for, right?" I looked at her parents and Chloe. Mr. Richard didn't even look up from his plate, like it was all planned. Mrs. Margaret nodded, like it was the most logical thing in the world, and Chloe let out a giggle while staring at her phone. I couldn't believe it. "Emily, this is our house. I bought it for US. How can you just give it to them?" I said, trying not to yell. She got serious and replied, "Don't be selfish, honey. My family comes first, and you're part of that. We can rent something while you save for another one." That's when I lost it. I told them no, that there was no way I was giving up the house I'd worked so hard for. Mr. Richard stood up and pointed at me. "Look, kid, if you can't take care of my daughter and us, you don't deserve her." Mrs. Margaret added, "I always knew you were nobody." Chloe just laughed and said, "What a drama queen, bro, chill out." Emily looked at me with tears in her eyes and said, "If you don't support them, I don't know if this is going to work between us." That night, I didn't sleep well. I stayed in the living room, staring at the ceiling, my heart in pieces. I was furious with Emily, her parents, Chloe, everything. But the truth is, I love her too much. I didn't want to lose her. I thought about fighting, about yelling at them all to get out of my house. But when Emily came over and hugged me, crying, saying, "Please, honey, do it for me," I crumbled. I gave in. I was so in love I couldn't imagine my life without her, so I agreed. The next day, Emily signed some papers to transfer the house to her parents' name. I didn't say anything, just watched as my dream went down the drain. We moved into a small apartment, a cramped place with one bedroom and walls so thin we could hear the neighbors snoring. I paid the rent, of course, because Emily didn't contribute a dime. She said her store's salary was for her things, and I, like an idiot, accepted it. I thought things would calm down over time, that she'd see how hard I was trying for us. But I was so wrong. The next 2 months were a nightmare disguised as normal life. I kept working like crazy, picking up extra hours to pay the rent, the bills, the mortgage on the house Emily gave her parents, and, of course, her family's demands. Because, yes, even after giving them the house, they didn't stop asking for things. Mr. Richard called one day to say the air conditioning in their new house wasn't working right, and that I should send someone to fix it. "You're the man of the family, aren't you?" he said in that tone that made my blood boil. I paid the technician, even though it meant I had no money for gas that week. Mrs. Margaret wasn't far behind. Every time we visited, because Emily insisted on going every weekend, she greeted me with a list of complaints. "The washer's making noise. Fix it. The lawn's too long. Mow it." I'd show up exhausted from work, but there I was mowing grass or carrying grocery bags while she watched from the window like I was her servant. Chloe, meanwhile, kept up her mocking. Once, she said in front of everyone, "Good thing you moved to that little apartment, bro, because this house is for people with class." Emily laughed like it was a great joke, and I stayed quiet, grinding my teeth. The abuses never stopped. Every family outing was the same. I paid for the meals, the movie tickets, the overpriced coffees Chloe ordered at Starbucks. Once we went to a halfway decent restaurant, and Mr. Richard ordered the most expensive dish on the menu, looked at the bill, and slid it to me, saying, "You got this, right?" Emily didn't even blink, just smiled and said, "Thanks, honey, you're the best." But I didn't feel like the best. I felt like a walking ATM. The worst part was that Emily never defended me. If I tried to complain, like when I said I couldn't afford a beach trip they wanted, she'd start crying and say, "Why are you so selfish? They're my family, and you should want to help them." I'd explain that I was exhausted, that the money wasn't enough, but she'd just repeat, "If you loved me, you'd do it." And I, like a fool, kept giving in because I didn't want to fight with her. But there came a point where I couldn't take it anymore. It was a Sunday, after another weekend at her parents' house. We'd gone to celebrate Chloe's birthday. I paid for the dinner, the cake, and even a gift Emily insisted on getting, an expensive purse Chloe had seen on Instagram. During dinner, Mr. Richard said a real man wouldn't complain so much about spending on his family. Mrs. Margaret added that I'd never be good enough for what Emily deserved. And Chloe, while opening my gift, said, "Thanks, bro, though with your salary, I don't know how you afforded this." Everyone laughed, including Emily. I stayed quiet, feeling something break inside me. That night, back at the apartment, I told Emily I was done. I told her how I felt, used, humiliated, tired of her family treating me like garbage and her never saying a word. I hoped she'd understand, that she'd finally support me like a wife's supposed to. But no, she crossed her arms and said, "If you can't handle my family, you can't handle me. They're part of me, and if you don't accept them, I don't know what we're doing together." It was like a slap in the face. That's when I realized she wouldn't change, that to her I'd always be second place, the guy who pays and shuts up. So I made a decision. I wasn't going to keep living like this, but I also wasn't going to let them win so easily. If they wanted my sweat and money so bad, I'd give them a lesson they'd never forget. I realized that no matter how much I gave, it would never be enough for her or her family. I'd sacrifice my dream of owning a house, my peace of mind, even my dignity, and for what? So they could treat me like an old rag. That night, while Emily slept in the bed and I stayed on the couch in the apartment, I started thinking about how to get out of this hole. And then it hit me. The house. The damn house I'd given them. Even though Emily had put it in her parents' name, the mortgage was still in my name. I was the one who signed the papers with the bank, the one legally obligated to pay every month. That meant, technically, I still had power over what happened to it. And if I stopped paying, well, the bank wouldn't ask Mr. Richard and Mrs. Margaret how much they loved it. They'd just take it and auction it off. It was a crazy idea, but the more I thought about it, the more sense it made. If they wanted to play with me, I'd play with them too. The next morning, I acted like nothing was wrong. Emily was still mad about our fight, but I didn't want to argue anymore. I told her, "You're right. Honey, I'm going to make things right for you and your family." She smiled, thinking I'd given in again, and gave me a hug. But while she hugged me, I was already planning my next move. I didn't tell anyone, not even my work buddies, who'd already warned me 1,000 times to leave Emily. This was going to be my secret. The first month was easy. I just didn't make the mortgage payment. Meanwhile, I kept paying the apartment rent and basic bills, but every extra dollar went into a new account I opened in my name. No luxuries, no extra spending. If Emily asked why we weren't going out as much, I told her I was saving for something special. She got excited, thinking it was for her or her family, and I let her believe it. The second month was when things started getting interesting. The bank sent me a notice with red letters and words like default and foreclosure. I tucked it away in the same drawer as the first one. Emily still didn't notice anything, but I knew time was ticking. Meanwhile, the abuses didn't stop. One afternoon, Mr. Richard called to ask me to buy them a new fridge because the one that came with the house wasn't cooling right. I told him I couldn't, that things were tight, and he got furious. "You're useless," he yelled over the phone. "Why'd you marry my daughter if you can't support us?" I hung up without answering, but inside I was smiling. "Keep talking," I thought. "You'll see." Chloe had her moment too. She texted me asking for money for a makeup course she wanted to take. "You're my brother-in-law. Support my dreams," she wrote with a bunch of emojis. I told her I didn't have it, and she blocked me on her messaging app. Emily, as always, took her family's side. "Why can't you help my sister? It's an investment in her future." I told her there was no money, that work was tough, and she locked herself in the bedroom to cry. I didn't care anymore. I was done with her tears and her guilt trips. By the third month, the bank got serious. I got a certified letter saying if I didn't pay the overdue amount in 30 days, they'd start the foreclosure process. This time, I didn't hide it as well, and Emily found it. "What is this?" she screamed, waving the paper in my face. "Why aren't you paying the mortgage? My parents live there." I told her the truth, or at least part of it. "I don't have the money, Emily. Between the rent, the bills, and everything your parents asked for, I can't keep up." She went hysterical, saying it was my fault, that I'd promised to take care of everyone. "Fix this right now," she ordered. But I didn't do anything. I just looked at her and said, "I can't, honey. Let them figure it out." That was the final straw. Emily called her parents that same night, and the next day, all three showed up at the apartment like angry bulls. Mr. Richard shoved me against the wall and yelled, "What's wrong with you, you good for nothing? You want us to lose the house?" Mrs. Margaret was crying like I'd stolen her life, and Chloe insulted me with everything she could think of. "You're a loser." I always knew it. Emily just stood there, watching, not defending me once. I let them vent, and when they were done, I said calmly, "The mortgage is in my name. If I don't pay, the bank takes the house. There's nothing you can do." Mr. Richard tried to swing at me, but I dodged and told them to leave before I called the police. That night, Emily told me she was disappointed in me, that I wasn't the man she thought I was. "If you can't handle this, I don't know how we're going to make it," she said before locking herself in the bedroom again. I didn't answer. There was nothing left to say. The plan was in motion, and for the first time in years, I felt in control. The days after that fight in the apartment were total chaos, but I wasn't scared or guilty anymore. I was determined. Emily barely spoke to me, just gave me dirty looks or threw out comments like, "Fix this, or you'll regret it." But I didn't do anything. I let the clock run, let the bank notices pile up, and let the 30-day deadline expire. Every time a new notice came, I stashed it in the drawer like it was a trophy. I knew what was coming, and for the first time in a long time, I felt free. One Monday morning, about 3 weeks after the last letter, someone knocked on the apartment door. It was a guy from the bank, a serious man in a cheap suit with a folder in his hand. He told me he was there to officially notify me that the house was entering foreclosure and auction due to non-payment. I asked him to explain everything clearly like I didn't understand, but really I just wanted to make sure there was no turning back. He said the property would be seized in a couple of days and that the occupants, meaning my in-laws and Chloe, would be evicted if they couldn't negotiate with the bank. I thanked him and closed the door. Emily wasn't home. She'd gone to work, so she didn't have a chance to butt in. That same afternoon, the bank must have sent the notice to the house because my phone started blowing up with calls from Mr. Richard. I didn't answer any, but he left about 10 voicemails. The first was pure rage. "Listen, you useless jerk, what did you do? We got a letter saying they're taking the house." By the last one, he was almost crying. "Please, kid, pay what you owe. Don't do this to us." I listened to every message with a smile on my face and then deleted them. Let them squirm, I thought. After everything they'd done to me, I wasn't lifting a finger for them. The eviction was scheduled for a Thursday morning, and I didn't want to miss it for the world. After everything that family had put me through, I wanted to see their world fall apart with my own eyes. So that day, I got up early, grabbed my old car, and drove to the neighborhood where the house was. I didn't park too close, just close enough to have a good view from the corner hidden behind some trees. Around 10 a.m., the bank people showed up with 2 cop cars. I saw them knock on the door, and after a bit, Mr. Richard came out looking like an angry bull, yelling at the officers, "This is my house. You have no right." The cops ignored him, and behind him came Mrs. Margaret and Chloe, both crying like their souls had been ripped out. Then the eviction crew came with boxes and started pulling everything out. Furniture, clothes, the fancy TV I'd bought them, even Mrs. Margaret's tacky curtains. They tossed it all onto the sidewalk like it was trash, and I couldn't take my eyes off them. Mr. Richard kept yelling, his face red, saying he'd sue everyone. Mrs. Margaret sat on the curb, hugging a lamp like it was her last hope, sobbing, "This is an injustice. God will punish us all." Chloe, with tears streaming down her face, tried to go live on Instagram, filming everything with her phone and ranting about the eviction team. But a cop told her to step back or they'd take her phone. She let out a shriek and started insulting them. "You're all bullies. This isn't over." But no one paid attention. In less than an hour, the house was empty, locked up with a chain and a sign that said foreclosed property. The 3 of them stood there, surrounded by their scattered belongings, watching the bank people leave. Me from my hiding spot couldn't help but smile. After years of humiliation, seeing them like that was worth every second. That same afternoon, Emily got back to the apartment we were renting. I was there, calm, sipping coffee, when she burst in with her parents and Chloe behind her, all carrying bags and suitcases. "We're staying here," she said like it was an order. They have nowhere to go because of you, so you're going to fix this. I stared at her, stunned. You really think I'm letting them live here after everything? I shot back. Mr. Richard stepped toward me and pointed. You got us into this. Now you get us out. Mrs. Margaret and Chloe started bringing their stuff in without asking, like the place was theirs. I didn't think twice. I grabbed my phone and called the police. I told them there were people trying to get into my apartment without permission. Emily's eyes went wide. Are you crazy? I'm your wife. I replied, not for much longer. In 15 minutes, 2 cop cars showed up. I explained that I was the only one on the lease and didn't want these people here. Mr. Richard tried to argue, but the cops didn't give him a chance. They dragged all 4 of them out, with Emily screaming that it was unfair and Chloe insulting me from the stairs. When they were gone, I locked the door and bolted it. Emily left with them. That night, Emily called me. This is over, she said, her voice shaking with anger. If you can't support my family, I don't want you in my life. I didn't argue. I just said, fine, good luck. I hung up and felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I thought that was it, but I was wrong. 3 days later, someone knocked on the door. It was Emily, alone this time, her eyes red from crying. I have nowhere to go, she said, almost whispering. My parents don't want me with them. They say it's all my fault. Please, let me stay. We can fix this. She tried to get closer, but I stepped back. I'm sorry, Emily, I said. I don't love you anymore. Everything we had ended when you chose your family over me. She dropped to her knees, crying and begging. Please, don't leave me like this. I love you. I made a mistake. But I didn't feel anything for her anymore. I told her to leave, that I didn't want to see her again. Emily kept crying, saying she had no one, but eventually she got up and left. After that, I heard that Mr. Richard, Mrs. Margaret, and Chloe ended up renting a tiny room in a rough part of town. Without my money, they couldn't keep up their old lifestyle. Mr. Richard went back to driving a cab, something he swore he'd never do again. Mrs. Margaret started selling handmade bracelets on the street, and Chloe stopped posting on Instagram. Now she sells cheap makeup from a catalog to get by. Emily, from what I heard, is living in a cheap motel because her parents wouldn't take her back. The divorce is in process. It'll be quick since we have nothing to split, thanks to a prenup. I kept my car and my savings, and she has nothing to fight with. Now I live alone in the little apartment. No luxuries, but in peace. Sometimes I think about everything I went through and wonder if it was worth it. But then I remember that day, watching them haul their stuff out like trash, and I know it was. I'm not one to gloat over others' misfortune, but after what they did to me, seeing them on the street was the best ending I could have asked for.
Subscribe for more daily stories.